Good morning, everybody. So today we have sort of a math problem, which is kind of funny. Pascal was a mathematician. There's an awful lot of philosophers who were mathematicians. It's a funny convergence of those two fields. So we have to learn a little math to really understand Pascal's wager. It's not hard math, but I want to start with it. What you have in Pascal is a case of decision theory. This paper, this Pascal's wager, is actually the first paper in the decision theory. And it was about the existence of God. And check that. It really wasn't about the existence of God. It was about what bet you should make if you don't know whether God exists. That's why they call it a wager. It's a bet. And so I want to start with the mathematics of betting. So I drew a little decision matrix. This may be backwards on the screen. It's backwards on my screen. I'll try to flip this later, but if I can't, turn it around in your head and hopefully you can read it anyway. Okay, so here's the underlying mechanics of how this kind of problem works. There's nothing about this that is specific to God. God throws a wrinkle in it, as we will see soon. But consider this as a more general story. Let me explain what I drew here. This little decision matrix, on the top here, you're going to have possible outcomes. They could be anything. Think of this as a horse race. A and B are two horses. A has, as you see this 0.25 here, 25% chance of winning. B has a 75% chance of winning. Which one should you bet on? You don't know yet, because there's a lot of other things you need to know. You've got two options, two bets over here. You can bet on A, you can bet on B. The missing ingredient is the payoff. What do you get paid if you're right? Let's say that horse A pays off $100 and horse B pays off $50. Now we actually have enough information to make a decision. What do you do with it? What you do, here's the underlying idea. A 50% chance at winning, say, $1 million has a value. It's not worth $1 million. It's not worth nothing. It's worth 50% of $1 million. So $500,000. A 10% chance at $1,000 is worth $100. 10% of 1,000. And so you do that. You do it across the rows here. You think, I have a 75% chance at $100 here. What is 75% of 100? $75. And I've got a 25% chance at nothing. Add those up, 75 and nothing, and you get 75. Bottom line, a 25% chance of nothing and a 75% chance of 50. 75% of 50 is 37.5. And now you have enough information to really make a decision. Which of these is bigger? That one. So that is the better bet by this amount. Think of it, what is it really telling you? It's telling you that if you ran this story over and over again, you're only going to run it once. But if you did this horse race over and over again, here would be your average outcome, your expected value. Okay? This paper is not about horses, but the math is the same. You are going to need some ingredients, some probabilities, some options, and some values attached to those options. All of these are going to be hard when it comes to thinking about God and betting on God. So that's what Pascal is doing, betting on God. Let's stop before we start and think about that fact, okay? Pascal's wager is a bet. It starts from a place of, I was going to use the word ignorance, but I'll use that word, and it's not supposed to be pejorative. It's not supposed to be negative. He says so himself. He says, God is on the infinite side of a chasm, or there is an infinite chasm, and on the other side of it, we don't know whether there's a God. We are ignorant of the facts about the universe. All of the first page of this reading, the infinite nothing stuff, is meant to suggest that he thinks he doesn't know whether God is there. And he has to make a bet in the meantime. A bet. So how does that bet work? God is different than horses because God is infinite and infinitely unknown. His existence is unknown, and his attributes are unknown. Even his probability is unknown. So if we have to bet on God, the first thing to ask ourselves is, what is the probability that God is there? He treats it in the first instance as a coin toss. I think you should think carefully about that and think, why a coin toss? Why 50%? Most probabilities in the world are not 50%. The probability that, you're going to live to be exactly 78 years old is not 50-50. A lot of other numbers out there. But let's start with it. 50%, I'm writing it on my little, you can copy this matrix. Take a minute, pause the video, copy this. When you're done, we'll move on. You ready? All right, we're going to add some stuff. A minute ago, when I had this as a horse race, I had probabilities attached to these possibilities. Let's say that the probability of God's existence is, as he says, 50-50. It's a coin toss. And now you have A is God exists and B is he doesn't. You've got two bets you could make. You believe in him or you don't. I want to stop right there too. There's some standard criticisms and questions people have about this. The first one was that, where do we get these probabilities from? The second is, why is he talking about belief? It's a standard Christian trope that belief gets you to heaven, but that's not something we say we know. Some Christians think belief is all you need to get to heaven. Some think there's nothing you can do to force your way into heaven, that it's not up to you. Belief doesn't get you there. Actions don't get you there. Only the grace of God can get you there. That's actually the sort of orthodox position, is it's not under your control. So, I glossed right over a third possibility, which is that it's action-centered. Maybe it's your works that determine whether you get to go to heaven. Sort of giving away the game here. This is about heaven. But, yeah. Got two people. One believes in God and is very bad, does bad things. The other doesn't believe in God but does good things. Who does God let in? For Pascal glosses over all that and treats this as a matter of bets about beliefs, just beliefs. You could change this and make it about something else, but for him it's belief. So you got two options, believe or don't believe, and two possibilities. God is there or he's not. Now, so I'm gonna sort of sketch that in here. It's hard to read, but 50% chance that God is there, 50% that he's not. You can believe or you can not believe. Now, what happens if you believe in God and he's there? Well, you get an infinite reward. Draw an infinity right there. What happens if you believe in God and he's not there? You lose something. You waste your time. You lose something in this finite life. Let's say it has a value. I arbitrarily assigned it a number, but it's finite. What happens if God is there and you didn't believe in him? You lose an infinite reward. I don't know how to value that. Negative infinity, but it's not negative infinity. It's just a loss of a finite thing. Maybe you failed to gain the infinite thing you could have gained. But in the meantime, you gain what you would have lost by wasting your time if he's not there, so to speak. Now, here's why I said it matters that the problem is about God and about infinite things. Remember that conversation we were just having about these probabilities and how we don't know what they are? Here's the funny thing. What is 50% of infinity? Infinity. What is 2% of infinity? Still infinity. What is 0.5% of infinity? Still infinity. What if God's existence is 1 in 10,000? 1/10,000th of infinity is infinity. No matter how likely God is, it is the rational choice to bet that he's there because the expected value is infinite. And then you do the bottom line, and percentages of, finite numbers are going to be finite. So this, let's say, is some finite number vastly short of the infinite reward you could have had. This is an odd outcome. Take a look. This number didn't matter as long as it's not 0. As long as God is not impossible, Pascal's wager suggests that it is rational to expect an infinite reward if you believe in it. So what do if you don't know that God is there? You believe anyway because you want that reward. That's the argument. There's a lot of things to think about in this argument. Some things we don't know. Number one, which God are we doing this for? Every one of them tells the same story. Believe in me and you get the infinite thing. What if there's 100,000 gods and you have to pick the right one? What if you pick the wrong one? That's one thing. Two, I think we don't know what these numbers are. And we don't know that they're not infinite too. If this number is infinite too, then the problem dissolves. What do I mean by that? This number right here represents what happens if God is there and you didn't believe. Now I want to ask yourself whether you think you really know that the probability that God will take some non-believer to heaven is impossible. Impossible. Could God take Mother Teresa, who stopped believing in God, and take her to heaven? Is that possible? Could he? Does he have the power to save Mother Teresa? Let me explain why I'm talking about Mother Teresa. She stopped believing in God. She wrote a book about it. It's an odd fact. She's very good in the grand scheme of things. At least people think she's good, and maybe God thinks she's good. And she tried to save the dying street people of Calcutta for 50 years. Does she go to hell because she's doubted for a while? So here's the question. Could God save her? Could God bring her to heaven? If that's possible, if the probability is not 0, if it's 1 in 10,000, then this number is infinite too. Even if the probability of it is 1 in 10,000, then you get the same answer over here that you got up here, no matter how likely it is. That's sort of the power of Pascal's wager in the first place, is it doesn't matter how likely your story is, as long as it's possible that God could give you an infinite reward for action X, then you should do action X. Believe? Don't believe? Get the same outcome. That's the second problem with Pascal's wager. We don't know what God will do to whom. We don't even know what the probabilities are. The third criticism, this is from William James. Remember mysticism, that reading we had on mysticism from William James? The problem William James wants you to think about is whether God will like it if you're believing in him just because you want a reward. What if he doesn't like that? What if he wants belief to be authentic? What if he wants belief to be sincere, not selfish? Is there something selfish about this whole story where you're like, let me see what the numbers tell me gives me the best answer and do that? That's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about what we don't know about this story as much as what, the thing about Pascal's wager, I think people tend to like it because it simplifies and mathematizes the thing they've been told their whole lives anyway. Just believe what we told you and you'll get an infinite reward. And Pascal's like, I got a math problem for that. When we in philosophy read it, we tend to read it for revealing our underlying assumptions and how much we may not know what they mean. One more thing about it. There's an assumption lying underneath it that we'll see again when we read Clifford next week. It's called voluntarism. Voluntarism is the idea that you can choose what to believe. I want you to think carefully about whether you think that's true about yourself. I'm going to give you an experiment. Try to believe that you are the planet Mercury. I'll give you $100 if you can believe that you're the planet Mercury. I mean, really believe it. Don't just say it. Think it. Believe it. Can you? Of course you can't. You can pretend, you can try, you can imagine. Imagining is not believing. It's step one of believing, is imagine something. The rest of belief is much harder than mere imagining. Belief may not be a matter of choice. It may not be something you can do on a bet. Voluntarism is the idea that it is within your willpower to believe or not believe things. And most of the time, it seems like you can't really do that. If you believe in God, you probably can't stop for money. And if you don't believe in God, you probably can't start because someone promises you a reward. Maybe it would be better if we could, but probably we can't. All right, I'll post the discussion board shortly, and you guys have a good day.